I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Hey everybody, I put a call out for questions regarding my position as an atheist, and I've gotten some great responses, so I'm going to get to them here. I won't be able to get to them all, so this will end up being a series of videos, but keep asking your questions, and I'll get to them when I can. So who do we have first up? First up we have Cheesem89, who asks, what made me become an atheist? And he asks for details. No one thing made me become an atheist, it was more of a process, so I can just describe the process that I went through. As a young man, I was a fan of comic books. Mostly Thor comic books were my favorite from around the age of 12 or 13 years old. I enjoyed the comics so much that I actually would go to the library to learn more about these characters that I was reading about. Because you could get comics about once a month, but there were a lot of things in the library. Now, I knew Thor was mythology. But as I learned more about it, I learned that Thor was actually a god, that he was actually a part of a religion that a culture actually believed in and worshipped at one time. I also learned more about all mythology. I started getting into Greek Roman mythology, Egyptian mythology. Now, I knew that these were all mythologies. That was something I understood, but it wasn't until I really read about them that I got a sense of how much these were really religions at one time. And I also started to see the similarities that these stories had with the stories that I understood to be true in the Bible and the things I had been taught ever since I was a kid. And my natural curiosity led me to ask questions. Mainly, why are these stories and these gods now considered mythology, while my God and the stories that I know about are now considered true? And it was because of cultural change, conquering, new discoveries, that these gods died out. So I wondered, what's to stop the evolution of culture, new discoveries, possible conquering of our country or something, from causing what I consider to be true and to be a real God to be moved into the realm of mythology? And if that were to happen, doesn't that make what I believe now already mythology? And so that's when I really started to doubt the validity of the biblical God. And so I stopped believing in the biblical God. But that didn't make me a full-blown atheist. Now, as I got older, I started to learn more about science. I was not only just a comic nerd, but I was a science nerd. I read a lot of science journals in my free time. And I not only learned that there was a lack of evidence for the existence of a God, that was one thing, but I also learned that there was a lack of evidence for the need for a God in the universe. And that was very important. Because if the universe doesn't need a God, then why should we start with the assumption that there is? The 0 point should be that there is not. And so that's when it started to shift in my mind. And the burden of proof went on to those who say God does exist. And since I wasn't seeing proof that the universe needed God or that a God existed, my belief completely disappeared, and I was officially an atheist. Okay, now Mean Mugga 11 asked, are my parents atheists? If not, how and when did I come out to them? No, my parents are not atheists. They are believers. We went through several religious associations as I grew up, from a Baptist to Black Muslim to Jehovah's Witness. So I had a lot of religion in my life as a young person. And as I evolved into my atheistic view, there was never a real an announcement with them. I was required to go to church with my family up until the age of 18. Until you're an adult, you have to go when we go. Now, luckily they didn't go but once every 2 or 3 weeks, but I still had to go. On my 18th birthday, I said, I'm an adult. I'm not going anymore. And then shortly thereafter, I moved out and it wasn't an issue. But I would As I got older, I moved out of the house. I would meet with my mother and I would discuss things. We talk religion all the time because we didn't agree about the Bible. That was something we talked about all the time. But it wasn't until one day in the middle of a relatively heated discussion, she asked me directly, "Well, I understand you don't agree with this in the Bible and this in the Bible, but you still believe in God, right?" And so I just said, "No, I don't at all." And she was really affected by it. She was quite hurt. She took it very personally. And it took a while to repair the kind of rift that opened at that point. This was the woman who had raised me, who had given me pretty much everything in my life and was kind of making me her future. And I had rejected her spiritual view. That's a big blow. So it hurt and it caused some damage that lasted for a few years. But, we got over it. We still talk religion all the time. We don't agree. She still tries to convert me, but we've gotten past it. But there wasn't a real. I'm making a big announcement. I'm coming out. It's just something that was obviously something there, and I was asked directly about it, and let her know, and that's how that happened. Let's see. Norway Flex 89 says it's weird that American atheists have to use the term "come out" to their parents. Well, maybe not weird, more like sad. How do I feel about the topic? Where he's from in Denmark, well, no, where he's from, which is Norway, along with Denmark and Sweden, the vast majority are atheists and agnostics. I too think it's sad that people have to come out to their parents, but I also understand it. Given my experience with my family, religion is something that's really dear to people, and it's something that they pass on to their children, or at least they see it as their responsibility to pass on to their children. To have their children reject that idea is a very personal thing. That's basically rejecting a person's soul, and so it's a big deal. And if you have a sensitive relationship with your parents, you understand that it's going to be a highly affecting thing to do, and you don't take that lightly. You don't just throw it, unless you're being rebellious. You don't just throw it in their face and say, "Haha, I don't believe in your God." It happens as part of a process. There's a time and a place, and you try to make it so it's least impactful, so that it keeps the peace in the family, because it can disrupt things. It's a big deal to people. And so I can understand it, this concept of coming out to your parents, though I also wish it wasn't necessary at all. And since we're on the topic of how people react to your coming out, I'll move on to Rick from Facebook's question. He says, "Do you feel the difference when a person doesn't know you are secular to the way they act after they find out?" And yes, there is or can be a difference. Much like with talking to your parents, people take their religion seriously, and it's a personal thing to them. And at the same time, there's this misconception that morality is directly attached to a belief in God, or directly attached to a particular religious system. And so if they find out someone doesn't have that religious system or doesn't believe in God at all, they often immediately start to question that person's morality, their trustworthiness, their value as a human being. And so they immediately become very skeptical of the character of that person. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. I've had young people that I worked with look at me agape and back away from me because they somehow thought I was, I don't know, a demon. The concept that a person talking to them rejected God was alien to them, and it was frightening to them. But most of the time, I've had people get very quiet. They don't necessarily know where to go next, and they hold things in. Obviously, things still percolate in their brain because at random intervals, people will pop up with a question about my atheism. They'll just be doing their regular thing and be like, "So, since you don't believe in God, where do you think?" Just out of the blue, which tells me it's been in their brain. they've been mulling it over and trying to come to terms with it, and it gets to a point where they just feel they have to get an answer. But it does make a difference, or it can make a difference, depending on that person, how they react to you. Those were great questions. I think I'm going to stop this one here so it's not too long, and I'll get another one out probably in the next day. I have a number here that I want to get to. Some of them will have to be all answered in videos all by themselves because they're really complex and I really want to get to them. So come back. We're going to keep doing this. Keep asking questions. You can leave questions in the comment thread here or go back to my original video where I asked for questions, and we'll continue in the future. Thanks a lot. Nice talking to you. Take care.
That's my job. That's what I do. I don't lose. I win. Is there no one on this planet to even challenge me?
Maybe you came by to congratulate me